Welcome to Conversations with Zaki Baruti, with your host Zaki Baruti. And like always, I want to give a shout out to my biological family. What's going on? To the Universal African Peoples Organization family, what's happening? And to the New Life Evangelistic Center family, headed by Reverend Rice. Keep up the great work. And a shout out to our cameraman, Bob. On that note, this evening will be another great evening, a good conversation. And in studio with me is Khatib Waheed. He's the Director of Community Engagement and Strategic Partnership out of the Office of the Circuit Attorney of the City of St. Louis, headed by Ms. Kim Gardner. On that note, welcome to Conversations with Zaki Baruti.
Well, I'm pleased to be here with you, brother.
You know, each time we start our program, I always like for my guests to give a little background information of who they are so that the community will know the person that's sitting in the seat.
Sure. Okay. Very briefly, some of my activist history might be of interest to some. We did a lot of work in the 80s to, first of all, push back against the Reagan budget cuts. So we had a statewide coalition called Coalition for Sensible and Humane Solutions. We even organized a campaign to send over 100,000 paper plates to the White House when First Lady Nancy Reagan said to the president that they needed new China in the midst of cutting the budgets, and so we sent them paper plates and suggested, why don't you eat off the paper plates? I've also had the privilege of being a part of the Free South Africa movement in St. Louis, fighting on two fronts. One, dealing with the sale of the Krugerrand, which was a gold coin that was bringing in significant amount of revenue to the South African government and was fueling that apartheid regime. And so we worked with a number of different organizations to stop the sale of that coin here in St. Louis. And then we also worked to boycott the sale of Shell Oil, which was a subsidiary of Royal Dutch Shell Oil that was also providing significant funding to the military regime in South Africa. So that was some of my activist work. I've since organized and had the privilege of establishing the Walbridge Caring Communities program that started at one school, spread to 20 schools in the city of St. Louis and 100 across the state. I've worked with the Center for the Study of Social Policy for about 8.5 years, dealing with issues of racial equity and structural racism. And so now I find myself landed in the office of the Circuit Attorney for the City of St. Louis, which happens to be the first female African-American Circuit Attorney, and I'm proud to be in that position.
Well, I salute you for your activism over the past years, and I can recall the demonstrations in Clayton, sharing that with you, and the great work that you have done. To that end, you working with Ms. Kim Gardner, who is the very first black prosecuting attorney. It takes me back to when we were trying to get Albert Walton elected in the early 90s, as well as I had personally asked Donnell Smith to run for circuit attorney and then Gerald Christmas. So there's a history of us trying to achieve that position. First of all, why is that a critical position that should be held by progressive folks?
Well, that's a good question. The circuit attorney, also called in some jurisdictions prosecutor or the district attorney, has a significant amount of power, because that's the person that will decide whether or not a person will remain free out here on the streets, or will go to prison, or will be out here on the streets with a charge or a suspended conviction. And so in an attempt to really level the playing field in the criminal justice system, it's important that the person in that position understands that everybody that's charged does not need to go to prison. Everybody that's charged does not necessarily need to be on probation, but everybody that's charged and where there's significant evidence needs to be held accountable. And so in Ms. Gardner's office, she has created what we call a diversion program, which is an opportunity for first-time low-level offenders to work towards their case, so that at the end of a year or a year and a half, their charges would be dismissed and there would be no conviction on their record. So this is one of the many ways that our office is dealing with the issue of mass incarceration. If I flip that concept on the inside out, when a person is on probation or parole, they are basically relegated to an underclass for the rest of their life. And so this system perpetuates an underclass. And what I mean by that is that once you have a conviction on your record, people can legally discriminate against you for the rest of your life when it comes to employment, when it comes to opportunities to go to school and get grants and loans, in terms of voting in some states, the opportunity to serve on juries, just a number of things to get impacted by a conviction. And therefore, when you have that, you become a member of an underclass. And when you layer that reality on top of the fact that we already have significant legacy of racism in this country, and recognizing that, there are 6 million people right now on probation and parole in this country.
6 million.
6 million, and 6 out of every 10 of them are black and brown folks. It raises a significant concern.
And if I may add, this country incarcerates more people than any other country in the world.
That is correct.
I just want to make sure that's on the record. I'm sorry,
sir.
Continue.
No, your point is well taken. The United States makes up about 5% of the world population, which means 95 out of every 100 people in this world are not U.S. citizens or residents. But yet we incarcerate 25% of the world's population. We incarcerate, to your point, more adults and juveniles than any other industrialized nation in the world. And so having somebody like Kim Gardner in that office is important as a way to appropriately redirect that.
Digressing, she's been in office since...
she took office in January of 2017, so she's right about 2.5 years in office.
I would like to get into what you consider some of her accomplishments. You mentioned about the diversion program, but there's other things that she has done too, and we want to get into that, but we don't have to get into that on the other side of the break.
I hope you're enjoying the Zaki Baruti Show, and I thank God for each one of you that are praying and working with us to get back into the 1411 Locust Building, one of the greatest acts of discrimination in modern history, as we see a 5-story facility shut down because neighbors didn't want to see those kind of people in the neighborhood, as they refer to them at. Those kind of people, as they refer to them at, are actually individuals that are made in the image of God, who Jesus said, as often you've done to the least of these, he said, even so you've done it unto me. As you share a gift of $10 or more with the New Life Evangelistic Center, you're not only helping New Life Evangelistic Center to get back into 1411 Locust Street, but you're helping so many of the hurting and the homeless in so many different ways. And as you share your gift, please request your copy of Through the Fire. It tells you the whole story of steps that were taken by the rich and powerful to shut down 1411 Locust. Now we're working to get back in there, and it will happen as you pray, as you get directly involved. So as you share your gift, be sure you ask for a copy of Through the Fire, and know that by giving, caring, and sharing at this time, you're helping so many people that are in need.
If you can't receive NLEC TV on channel 24.2 on your TV, you can watch us on your home computer or laptop, anywhere in the world. Simply type in NLEC TV, then select NLEC TV support and click on the small NLEC TV on the right of the menu bar. Click on the play indicator to start the live programming, the same programming as 24.2. You can then enlarge the picture and enjoy your favorite programs like the NLEC Worship with Larry Rice, The Bernie Hayes Show, Experience the Benefits of Change with Pastor Burris, Conversations with Zaki Baruti, News and Views, and so much more.
Can you hear the music of creation?
NLEC TV is also available on all mobile devices such as smartphones and iPads. By getting the NLEC TV app, you can enjoy NLEC TV anywhere you go.
Welcome back to Conversations with Zaki Baruti. In studio with me is Brother Khatib Waheed, and he's the Director of Community Engagement and Strategic partnership with the Office of the Circuit Attorney under the leadership of Ms. Kim Gardner. On the other side, we were speaking of the diversion program as a progressive accomplishment of Ms. Gardner's office. Before we go into that, what is your role as director under her Office of Community Engagement and Strategic Partnership?
Sure. It's pretty multifaceted. First of all, I make a distinction between engagement versus outreach. Engagement for us means not only going out into the community and helping people understand how the office works, what her goals are, what her challenges are, what the opportunities are, but getting feedback from the community to learn what else can and should we be doing. And then thirdly, to kind of get some sense of what role citizens want to play in supporting that reform agenda. I also have responsibility in part of setting up or supporting what we call neighborhood ownership model, which is kind of a neighborhood-based strategy for residents to take a stand and have a role in the reduction of crime and the reduction of violence. But then also in terms of the strategic partnerships, one part that might really be important to lift up is it has to do with Ms. Gardner's vision about crime reduction and violence reduction being a public health issue, and therefore recognizing that we need partners in the overall process of crime reduction and violence reduction, and that the role of the police and the role of the prosecutor's office is important. But as she has said many times, we cannot, let me repeat, we cannot arrest and convict our way out of this. That there are issues pertaining to mental health and behavioral health, there are issues pertaining to employment, there are issues pertaining to poverty, and certainly those things are seated in issues of structural racism and racial disparities that need to be addressed. And so working with other important agencies to make sure that the core or the root causes of crime and poverty are addressed. So
how successful have you been, her office been in developing those partnerships?
Yeah.
And do you want to share a couple of the names of the partnerships?
Yeah, sure. Well, two that stand out in my mind. One is with St. Louis Public Schools. We have a memorandum of understanding with them, a kind of a relationship that we started in January of this year, so it's fairly nascent or fairly new. But the idea is Ms. Gardner had this vision and idea about setting up diversion centers. The listening audience may not know that the Circuit Attorney's Office does not have jurisdiction or authority over juveniles unless they've been certified as an adult. The family courts deals with that. But our goal is to prevent any of those juveniles from ever becoming involved with the adult criminal justice system. So we have a team of some really sharp individuals that work at 3 schools on a part-time basis, Walbridge, Yateman, and Carnahan, to try to help identify not only those youths who are at high risk of becoming involved with juvenile justice and criminal justice, but also to work with those young people who have positive leadership skills and try to make sure that they aren't ignored. So that's a partnership with St. Louis Public Schools. And then with CARE-STL, formerly known as Myrtle Hilliard Health Center. That relationship is very important because that helps seat in our office therapists, licensed clinical social workers, mastered social workers who can work with these young individuals as well as their families on issues of trauma and toxic stress, help them understand how certain things are triggering the violent behavior or the destructive behavior that they're showing in the community, and try to redirect that. So those are 2 partnerships.
Okay, and as you were talking, though, my mind went back to a program maybe the office can, or some agency can consider implementing. Do you recall they used to have a program where they take some of the young people to the prisons or the jails so that they can scare straight. I couldn't think of the name, you know. And in my mind, I was wondering would that kind of help in terms of diversion from criminal.
I would be reluctant to speak negatively about any attempt on the part of people who are trying to make a difference and trying to help our community and help kids and families. I will say this, however, that Scared Straight, in my humble opinion, was more effective when it was first introduced than it would be now, in part because of the mass incarceration. A lot of these kids have family members in prison.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like, for some, as absurd as this may sound, for some it's like a reunion in a space of safety. I'll give you a quick example. When I was doing work recently with St. Louis Public Schools, there was a 10-year-old kid who's a 5th grader, right, whose behavior was very aggressive in the classroom. I mean, he would turn over tables, he would try to fight the teacher, he was fighting his classmates. And when we got down to the core of it, the young man was saying, somebody said to him, son, you know if you continue down this path, you're going to end up in prison. And his basic response was, yeah, I know, I want to be with my daddy.
Wow, wow. Wow, that's real deep. That's deep. Now, turning back to accomplishments of Kim, you know, as an activist myself, over the years I've spoken on a lot of issues involving police misconduct and brutality in our community, murder and what have you. She has been real aggressive dealing with the police. Can you explain?
Sure. But first, I do want to say to the listening audience that the role of activists is just extremely important in an effort to reform these failed systems. The progress that she has been able to make, in part, it stands on the shoulders of those who have kind of been outside of the system, but recognizing that things need to change and pushing for change. So I just needed to say that. She has established, she's the first prosecutor in the state of Missouri that has established an exclusion list, or a Brady list, which is a list of names of officers who
Very first one ever.
Yeah, in Missouri.
Okay.
Yeah. Now they're in other states, but in Missouri, yes.
All right.
That basically says that if these officers have been charged with the crime, charged and or convicted, or if they have behaviors that are would raise questions in a jury trial, then they can no longer bring charges to our office. So they're not allowed to bring any issues to our office, to the warrant office. And the most recent insertion of those individuals comes from this Plain View project that was launched by a research group out of Philadelphia, where they examined Facebook and social media for a number of different police departments. And
Can you hold that thought? I'm
sure
sorry.
can. Sure.
We have to take a break.
Hello, I'm Larry Rice, Director of New Life Evangelistic Center and NLEC TV, and I come to you now and I ask you just to please pray and consider becoming a partner with us here so that we can continue to keep conversations with Zaki Baruti on the air. It's only because of the faithful support of individuals like you that we can provide this service along with a multitude of services to the poor, the fatherless, the widowed, the hurting, and the homeless. Your prayers, your gifts right now are absolutely essential as we confront gentrification in our community of rich and powerful people that want the poor and homeless out of sight and out of mind. We're trying to get 1411 open back up again. We can do that if you will help us. We can provide shelter once again. We're doing it in many other locations, but we need your help now to keep conversations with Zaki on the air and to help those that are hurting and need. And it's New Life Evangelistic Center, P.O. Box 473, St. Louis, Missouri. That's 63166. Or you can discover us online by going to nlecstl.org. Thank you for praying, caring, and sharing at this critical hour.
How important are St. Louis Metro passes to the needy? To provide stability and permanent change to the homeless, they need jobs. But how do they get transportation to look for work when they have no money? And when they find a job, how will they get there? Become a part of NLEC's Metro Pass program and help bring enduring change to a life.
I have doctor's appointments that I have to attend, going to seek jobs and putting in applications. I really would like you to understand the importance and the need for this ministry, and anything that you can do to keep this ministry going. Please know that it is an extension of God's love.
I want to ask you at this moment to please pray for our community. We need a prayer at this particular moment. So much hurt, so much pain, so much injustice. I see it on a daily basis, but God answers prayer. Pray for justice. Pray that the Holy Spirit will sweep across our community, and so many people who say God-fearing people, their hearts will be melted, and they'll reach out to these that Jesus refers to as the least of these. We'll see churches open their doors, and the Women in Need program coming forth. A church will open its doors, and we'll be able to take the women and the children that are suffering on the streets of our community to a particular church each night and bring them back. Pray that the doors of the 1411 Locust building will open soon, and the financial needs of the New Life Evangelistic Center during this very critical period will be met. Let's bind together in prayer. God answers prayer. Keep the faith and keep on praying for our community. Let's believe Him for miracles at this hour.
Welcome back to Conversations with Zaki Baruti. In studio with me, Brother Khatib Waheed. He's the Community Engagement and Strategic Director of Community Engagement and Strategic Partnership with the Office of the Circuit Attorney under Kim Gardner. Just before the break, you were speaking of the exclusion list.
Yes,
All right,
yes. I was mentioning the Plainview Project, which documented in a number of cities or jurisdictions the inappropriate behavior and language of police officers on Facebook. Comments that had really strong negative racial connotations, very xenophobic kind of language where they are speaking ill against immigrants on the basis of their religion, and to some extent even persons whose sexual orientation is not, quote, in the norm, unquote. And so that kind of language is just not acceptable. And the point here is that we're not trying to be the social cultural police. What we're saying is that the trust in our law enforcement and criminal justice system has been eroded because of certain behaviors and certain actions and certain language. And if we want to reduce crime, if we want to help people feel safe, then they have to feel that they can trust not only the police, but the prosecutor's office, the Department of Corrections, and the courts. All that's part of the criminal justice system. And when you have persons who are allowed to speak that kind of language, or who appear to be able to get away with police, the excessive use of force without the fear of conviction, that erodes the trust in the system. And unfortunately, the reality is that trust has been eroded in the black community at levels that we've probably never seen in a long time, or even ever. And technology has helped bring to front or to the fore the evidence of these things. When people can get on their phones and film things and Facebook it and so forth, things that have been happening for decades, maybe even for centuries, are now documented in real time. And so our office is saying that part of our effort to reduce violence and reduce crime is to restore or establish for the first time trust in the system.
So with that said, how many officers are on the exclusion list as of today?
Don't quote me on the exact number, but it's close to 50.
Now have the office, because you have a strong St. Louis Police Association. Mm-hmm. Have that been pushed back?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And I think, and I'm speaking in my I voice here, Ms. Gardner may not frame it this way, but I think that a distinction needs to be made between that association versus the everyday police officer, and the role that association plays in terms of kind of creating a culture that helps contribute to this lack of trust that exists between the police department and law enforcement officers. Real quickly, I would say that, and this is just not hard data, but I would say 95% of the police officers never even use their service revolver. Mm-hmm. But it's that small percentage of 5% or less that do, and they use it excessively, and the whole department gets painted by those behaviors.
Although I must add, though, too many times, though, you don't have enough of you have that blue wall of silence.
Yes.
That if, the officers would be more, and we have to take a head out to the Ethical Society of Police.
Yes.
That does speak about crooked cops and what have you. But when you talk about St. Louis Police Association, this is a side note in my own personal involvement. There used to be a president, Weegard, I believe, and he used to have a radio program. He would be cracking on Jamala Rogers and myself. And never forget, we were up testifying on behalf of community control of the police, and this officer said the only reason he against that is because Zaki Baruti is forward.
Yeah.
But that's a side note.
Well, that was kind of a compliment to you, actually.
Yeah, I know. On that note, we'll take another break.
An epidemic of homelessness is sweeping throughout the United States of America. In city after city, people are ending up on the streets. Now, instead of feeling overwhelmed, as believers, we can do three things. We can give, we can volunteer, and we can pray. We can pray for the homeless refugees that we're finding in one city after another, all over the United States. So many people ending up out on the streets, and the hearts of so many are growing cold at this particular time and indifferent to the need. Jesus said, as oft as you've done it to the least of these, he said, even so you've done it unto me. When's the last time you've prayed for the homeless refugees in the United States of America, appearing in city after city, not only in major cities, but even smaller cities? So many people ending up out on the streets, even in resort areas, places you never think you'd find homeless people, they're there. Jesus said, foxes have holes and birds have nests, but he, the Son of Man, had nowhere to lay his head. Please pray for the refugees. Please pray for the homeless people in America. And pray for those that are on the front lines, the first responders, reaching out through Jesus Christ among the homeless and hurting, whether it's in Springfield or St. Louis. Your prayers and gifts to the New Life Evangelistic Center makes a big difference. This New Life Evangelistic Center, P.O. Box 473, St. Louis, Missouri, is 63166.
John 11, verses 25 and 26.
I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die.
Welcome back to Conversations with Zaki Baruti. We only got a couple minutes with Brother Khatib Waheed, who's the Director of Community Engagement and Strategic Planning out of the Office of Kim Gardner. On the other side, we were talking about the exclusion list. Mm-hmm. Now, if these people, officers, are placed on the exclusion list, and they can't testify on behalf of different criminal cases, mm-hmm. then are they useless then? Should they be gotten rid of? I mean...
that's an interesting question. What tends to happen is that the police department is able to intercede with those officers from a human resources perspective first, so they deal with them as employees. And then maybe we can get into some criminal proceedings afterwards, and it really should be reversed. We should be able to deal with them on a criminal matter, and then after that, the department can decide if they want to keep them on. So it's kind of backwards. But I do want to say that our office, if I haven't said it already, we are not anti-police. There is no way our office can perform its functions without a police department. We can't go out and arrest people. We can't go out and investigate the allegations of criminal activity. The police have to do that. And then based on the evidence that they bring to us, then we can indict them and proceed with either a trial or probation or diversion. And so we need them, but we need them to function in a way that's less racially charged, that's not likely to create racial disparities and inequities, and that is more just and fair.
We only have about a minute left. If anybody wanted to reach out to you, how would they get in contact with you?
Sure.
Office?
The office number, the direct line to my office is 314-589-6247.
Say it again.
314-589-6247.
Now, we only have less than a minute, well, actually 30 seconds. So on that note, we want to again thank you for being here. In 10 seconds, you got any last closing statement?
We really appreciate the support we've gotten from the black community and from others, and we encourage you all to continue to follow what's going on with our office. We need advocates in terms of budget issues. We need advocates in terms of policy issues with regard to discovery laws. So we hope that you all will continue to be involved.
You have been listening to Conversations with Zaki Baruti. Join a progressive organization. Join the Universal African Peoples Organization. You have a website on UAPO.org. On that note, God bless each and every one of you. Thank you again.
Thank you, my brother.